Did you know Super Awesome Mix has an app? Go to the Apple App Store today and download Super Awesome Mix. It's free. You could start creating and sending your own digital mixtapes in just a few clicks. Also, there's links to our Instagram account and a link where you can follow your favorite podcast. Speaking of which, welcome back to another Super Awesome Mix. My name is Matt Sidholm, alongside my co-host and co-founder of Super Awesome Mix, Samer Abu Salbi. Samer, how we doing this week?
I am doing real well. Although, as I was looking at my track list for our mix today, I thought maybe you'd be worried that I'm not doing so well. There's a lot of angst. Jen always points this out every time I'm on her show. What are you listening to? She's like, "Are you okay?" And I feel like she would ask me that same question today.
Yeah, we strike different tones, I think, you and I, when it comes to musical
Yes.
selections. But yeah, we're going through, this is volume 2 of No Skip albums. So we're just going to feature one track, but we'll each talk about the album it's from. But yeah, I listened to most of the albums that you sent over, and I was like, yeah, is Samra okay? Is he doing all right? How quickly can we get back to the pure joy mixes? Okay, maybe pick Samra back up.
No, it's true. I don't know what's going on. Just it's been a busy month, and if you're a longtime listener, I'm not crazy about summertime. So I think summer just brings out a lot of these feelings of like being angry that it's not winter yet. That must be what's going on.
Yeah, in Texas right now it's like 120 degrees. So let's not complain. I don't know what you guys have going on in New York, but it's hot even for Texas right now.
That's fair. Yeah. I think we just bridged like 80 and whew, let me tell you. But we should get going on with the mix here. Get lost down a weather rabbit hole. One thing that I did as I was listening to your mix is I thought to myself, I graded your song selection of like, did this convince me to listen to the album or not? So I'm just going to spring that on you as we go through and on my picks to see if I did a good job or not.
I like that.
We'll start. Awesome. We'll start with your selection first. So you went with a song, Something to Talk About by Badly Drawn Boy. And this is on actually a soundtrack movie mix for About a Boy.
Yeah, so Nick Hornby, if you're familiar with him at all, he is an author and he's written several books. Fever Pitch, maybe most famously, I don't know, but the American movie version of it was turned into a baseball movie with like Jimmy Fallon and Drew Barrymore, and it was I think kind of terrible. But the the books he's written are brilliant. About a Boy is no exception, but the movie they made here starred Hugh Grant, and it's a great movie. It's worth checking out. But yeah, I remember while watching it, I was like, I really like the music in this one, and then realized it was all done by one artist. So Badly Drawn Boy, his real name's Damon Michael Go, and he's a multi-instrumentalist. Like he does a lot of unique things musically, and it's pretty interesting on this soundtrack because some of the tracks are just kind of short interstitials and just kind of are pure instrumental. And then he's got, a handful of songs that he's written out, and this was one of them. I love this soundtrack. I've probably listened to it, I don't know, way more times than I've ever seen the movie. Although, like I said, the movie's worth checking out. But yeah, I just love this. And this song in particular, I think really stands out. And, he's got a great voice. I can't say I've done a deep dive into a lot of his other music but I think for this soundtrack, I think he just knocked it out of the park, and I think it's definitely a no skip album for me.
That's awesome. Yeah, this one did check the box of like I'm convinced to go check out the rest of the album. So score one for you there. Yeah, and I was also thinking as I was listening to this, I was like, we should probably do like a specific theme of no skip albums for movie soundtracks, because I think there are some excellent movie soundtracks out there that are really like mixtapes for movies, right? Like it doesn't necessarily have to be just one artist that did the whole thing. And there's several that come to mind for me, but that I have not seen this movie. I have read the book. I really enjoyed the book. I'm told the movie's good. So this also might need to be some homework for me to finally watch the film and enjoy the soundtrack in the movie too. I think sometimes that gives a soundtrack like a little bit more oomph to it because you can kind of place it with like something that's going on in the story.
Yeah, you can definitely start to create a little more of an emotional connection, maybe to the
Right.
music if that's not there already. But yeah, definitely worth checking out. And it's kind of a light. I mean, it's a fun movie, so it's not like maybe it'll pick you back up, Samurai. I guess is what I'm trying to say.
All right.
All right. So your first pick, you went with "Disarm" by the Smashing Pumpkins, and this is from the album Siamese Dream.
Yeah, talk about being, needing a picking up. This is a very sad song. In fact, so sad once I really read the lyrics and understood what he was writing about, because this for me was always a song, and really the whole album was like more of the like musical mood, which is very angsty, very down, very depressed. All my 6 songs actually go in, like, chronological order, so this was me in, like, 8th or ninth grade, had a lot you have a lot of angst, I think, whenever you're a teenager, especially a young teenager. There's a lot going on, everything seems like the worst problem in the world, and this album was introduced to me by a girl I was interested in at the time, and we would drive around in her car listening to it, and so it's also cemented in my head of, like, that time period. But this track in particular is like Billy Corgan talking about like having abusive parents, and I actually think he later said that it was a time that he thought about suicide, but he wasn't, thankfully able to follow through on that. So it's a very dark song, which really comes through, I think, in his voice because a lot of the other album tracks are like kind of screaming, more angry. This one is a lot softer. Um, but still like a lot of power and a lot of ability to kind of express these darker side of emotions that we have and through storytelling and through just the sound of it. So I love this album for many, many reasons. It was probably, like I said, one of the first ones where I listened to it over and over again without skipping. But I promise I'm okay. I just wanted to kind of pick songs, again, chronologically through my life from albums that I would listen to over and over once I was introduced to them.
The song "Today" is also on this album, which we've talked about
Yes.
before. It's actually a song where he kind of wrote it in the vein of like, "This will be the last day of my life," essentially, and then he
Yeah, he
decides
wrote
not
that
to do that.
right, and he apparently wrote that song the same day he wrote this one, so he knocked out these 2, like, beautiful songs really on the same day, so yeah, he was definitely struggling with something, which is incredible.
Yeah, and this album, I mean, when it came out, I feel like it was impossible not to hear almost the whole album when it came out. I mean, there was a handful of singles on this one, and I don't know. I feel like everybody I knew had this album at the time, so yeah, I was definitely more familiar. I didn't necessarily, to your question on the first one, to convince me to listen to the whole album. As I started listening to the whole album, I was like, I think I've already heard this album several times just because of when it was made. But what did
Right.
stand out for me is like Billy Corgan. We've talked about this about bands recently, how they could be defined by a very like unique lead singer and kind of
Mhm.
carried by that. And I mean, this is no doubt that the case with Smashing Pumpkins because he does not have like a conventional singing voice. It's not like
Right.
you'd hear him singing just randomly at a karaoke bar and be like, that guy's got a beautiful voice, right? And
Right.
yet it works, right? Like, and he can definitely. I mean, they've had a long career. They just came out with new music this year, and so yeah, I mean, this is a really strong album overall, but a tough song definitely when you dive into it.
It is, yeah. And you just mentioned karaoke, and I think that that's an excellent segue to an artist who is really good, I think, at karaoke and piano bars and all fun things. So you went with the song "Movin' Out" (parentheses Anthony song) by the one and only Billy Joel.
Yeah, this is from the 1977 album "The Stranger," which is just beginning to end, just one song after another that you've probably heard a million times, like whether you're at the karaoke bar or somewhere else. Four of the songs on this album hit the top 25, and that doesn't include "Scenes from an Italian Restaurant," which I've included on my Desert Island mix, and I don't think we'll ever leave there. Yeah, I mean it's a really strong album just beginning to end. In fact, if you watched Ted Lasso this past season, and no, this will not be a spoiler, but the great Roy Kent at one point calls this album perfection, and
Yeah.
it's really strong. But I picked "Moving Out" just because we haven't featured this one. It was the name of the musical that they made, kind of featuring all of Billy Joel's music. So it's a great song. I'm sure you've probably heard it before. It's pretty popular. It was definitely one of those top 25 hit singles that I mentioned earlier. Kind of about just sort of giving up around like materialism, right? It's just kind
Hmm.
of the tough things that go along with that. And I think that's what I appreciate about this album is that it was made so long ago, but some of the themes from it still resonate today. And I think musically, it's just really strong too.
It is. I really enjoyed this song. This is a strong yes in terms of me going and checking out the album. The lines that really made me chuckle, it's like kind of like someone trying to convince someone else to just move out to the country, so it's like Anthony works in the grocery store saving his pennies for someday. Mama Leone left a note on the door. She said, "Sonny, move out to the country." And I just made me laugh because I feel like every now and then, maybe once a year, only once a year, my parents would be like, "So when are you going to move back to Texas?" And it's usually like right after I'm talking about some insane thing that's happening in New York City. And it's like, no, I love paying $150 for my iced coffee. Like, this is normal. So that really resonated with me, that line there.
Yeah, you got to pause. No, what I'm saying, I love this about the city. Yeah, no.
Right.
What do you mean I sound angry? Right? That's how everybody sounds here.
Right. No, great track.
All right, your next pick, you go with "Faint" by Linkin Park from the album Meteora.
Yeah, this album is so good. And I think this just had a re-release, like a 20th anniversary re-release, which is incredible. And I think that's part of why I've been rediscovering it because it's been like kind of, making the rounds and showing up here and there. But I recently got into running. If you listen to Super Awesome, you know this. I talk about it a lot. And this is one of those albums that I had run to back when I was running in high school and cross country. And so I reintroduced it into my life, this and like Prodigy. And both of them still stand up for just great like physical activity albums. Like you can hit start on this album. You don't need to shuffle it. You don't need anything else in your playlist and like just go and exercise to it because every single song is going to hit hard. Like there's a wide range. This one is on the angrier side. So it's like it's right in the middle. It's really good if you're like just really needing to push and get some energy out. But yeah, like this was an album I loved gaming to back in like high school and college, but then also really loved exercising too because it just had that, like I said, it just kept you high energy the entire time. And I think it's an excellent album. Like there's other amazing tracks you may have heard off of it, like "Somewhere I Belong," "Easier to Run," "Breaking the Habit," and "Numb," like just to name a few, but I think they're all worth listening to and checking out. So absolutely love this album and we'll continue to listen to it for many, many years.
I had a, similar thought about the workout part of it. Is as I was listening to this song in particular, really stood out to me as like, wow, I could definitely like work out to this, and like it would,
Mhm.
yeah, get me going. But yeah, then going through the whole album, it's like just one song after another where it's like you wouldn't really have to skip this, and this could just be your 45-minute run or whatever the length of the album is. The 20 years old thing really got me because I was like, I still think of Linkin Park as kind of a younger band. It's like,
Right.
wow, this album's 20 years old. So that one really threw me for a loop. But yeah, I think fans of the band will know, definitely a handful of the songs off of this one just from radio play. But yeah, it's a really strong one, beginning to end.
All right. So speaking of something that is a little bit older than 20 years old, you went with "My Own Peculiar Way," the track by Willie Nelson, and this is off of the album I believe called Country Willie, his own songs.
So actually, I picked the version from an album called Teatro,
Got it.
which
Okay.
came out later, kind of in the late '90s, where he put together. I mean, this album is so unique. I thought just because it's a really cool mix of songs, just that sound like classic Willie, but he's also got kind of these Spanish overtones to it as well, and just his songwriting throughout it is really strong. But you're right, this one's kind of a redo of an earlier song of his. I mean, I just love this one from a songwriting perspective. It's only like it's not super long from like a lyric standpoint, but I think he just
Right.
says so much in those words. The lyrics I called out here is, and though I may not always be the way you'd have me be, and though my faults may grow in number day by day, let no one ever say that I've ever been untrue, and I'll always love you in my own particular way. And I just think that's so, I don't know. I think maybe I feel this way about my own relationship, but it's like, I think we're all kind of quirky and we kind of, if you have a partner, it's like, you have your faults, but for whatever reason, that person stays with you and probably vice versa. And so I just think this song in particular is really strong in expressing that. And this whole album, I mean, again, it's kind of later in Willie's career that he wrote a lot of these songs, and it's just so good from one track to the next.
Yeah, it's a really cute song. I'm gonna put this one in like the maybe just because it's not what I would normally listen to, but I do really love Willie Nelson. I've always found his voice to actually be very calming, especially when the song topic is something like this that is very cute. And it's like a great little love song that is more on like the realities of like loving someone. It's like some love songs are very grandiose in terms of like no matter what you do, like I'm gonna love you forever, and that's great and all, but there's like a reality to there's a reality to love where like certain things that you said are just going to drive you crazy even though you love this human being, but you still love them in your own peculiar way. So I think it's great. I enjoyed this one a lot.
That's a great point. Yeah, there is a limit to those things. You can't just keep doing those
Right.
awful things and pretend to be forgiven. All right, your next pick. You went with Aerials by System of a Down, and this is from the album Toxicity.
Yeah, I've mentioned this album a number of times. I know we've featured a couple of tracks from them. Absolutely love Toxicity. I really do think it's like a perfect album start to finish. If you are into new metal and heavy metal and hard rock and all of those kind of genres and subgenres. It's another one that my memory of this one is also related to running. This was an amp up album that we would listen to on our way to cross country meets. We would like blast it in the bus, and it was on like a CD player that someone hooked up to some speakers. And so of course, like every time the bus hit a bump, the music would cut out, because this was like kind of
Yes.
it depended on whether or not you had one of those no skip CD players, right? Like it's so good. If you didn't though, you felt everything through the music. It'd be like, oh, so good. Great memories. And so yeah, I mean it's an awesome, it's like they are such a great protest rock group. They're up there with like Rage Against the Machine. They sing about a lot of different things on this album that are kind of problems with the world. And as we kind of joke sadly about, they remain problems of the world all these years later. Um, but yeah, I think, I also really enjoy some of the lyrics in this song in particular, like the opening verse, "Life is a waterfall, we're one in the river and one again after the fall." And he's just kind of talking about how we are never really gone, even after death. Like death is just another form of us taking, our energy goes somewhere else, back into the ground, into the energy that the worms eat, and blah blah blah. Right. So I just love that first line really kind of sets the tone for the rest of it. But it's a great rock song and it's an amazing exercise album as well. So absolutely love this one.
You mentioned Rage Against the Machine, and I actually had that like in my notes because we talk about the Tom Morello filter that just comes on songs and it's like a Tom
Yes.
Morello song, right? And it's kind of the same thing here with guitarist Darren Malakanian, where it's just like I just the more I listen to it, the more I'm like, God, this guy is awesome on the guitar. And I think I'd never really maybe realized that. I don't think I've ever listened to a System of a Down album just beginning to end. And
Hmm.
I mean, I just started to like track by track, I just started to wait for him to come in, right? Because they kind of do
Right.
these intro parts that are a little softer. And then he would come in with that distinctive guitar playing. And I'm like, this is awesome. So every single time I started to get kind of fired up, just waiting for him to enter the track.
That's awesome. Yeah, it is really good. I would apply System of a Down filter to my life every now and then. I'd get a lot done. Probably be really
A lot of energy. A
be
lot of
really
energy
angry.
there.
Yeah, might be really angry at the end of it. But all right, track 7, your next pick. You went with Come On" by Sheryl Crow, and it's off of the same titled album, Come On, Come On.
Yeah, this was Sheryl Crow's fourth studio album. I thought this was so the one big hit from this was "Soak Up the Sun." So you've probably heard that because been played a million times on the radio. But the whole album here, I think, is really strong. Just as far as it's a little less pop hits and it's a little more like rock music, kind of. And she still gets to show off her voice because I think she has an amazing voice and just some great songwriting, kind of beginning to end. And this one's kind of like that relationship that just is never right, but you're still in it. And, kind of a classic theme, I think, in music. But I think she does a really good job of it in this particular song. And the come on is kind of refers to the come on, break my heart again. Right. She's just waiting for this person to disappoint them. We talk about love having limits a couple songs ago. And I think Sheryl
Right.
Crow adequately expresses that here in this song. But yeah, just the whole song. I mean, I think or the whole album, I think just does, I don't know. I've always loved this one amongst her, set of her whole discography. I've listened to a lot of her work. And this one, I think beginning to end, I think is really strong.
Yeah, you mentioned "Soak Up the Sun," and you're right. I think that's the song I'm most familiar with her. So it was nice to hear something different. And I like the lyrics on this one a lot, and so that one kind of drew me more into it. Um, I love the line, "You took the best of me and threw it away. Too bad the rest of me still wants you to stay." And I think that's just a great summation of what you just mentioned, right? Or it's like, why didn't you throw away all of me so that way I don't want you to come
Yeah.
back?
Can we just move on? Right.
Right, right. I just think the way that she sings that is like such a great, like, that connects with a lot of people in relationships, unfortunately, right? Where you're just like you said, you need to move on, but you can't move on because there's a part of you that still wants to be in this relationship that may not be the greatest for you. So I really liked it. It's a good pick.
All right, your next pick, and I wasn't as familiar with this band as your three previous ones, so this one is a little different for me. This is Resurrection by the Temper Trap.
Yeah, this is off of the album Conditions. And oh, I love the Temper Trap. They were first introduced to me from the soundtrack, actually, 500 Days of Summer. They were one of the songs on that, and they opened up. They didn't open up the film, but they had a song in the film. Um, and yeah, so I ended up like liking that song so much that I got this album and listening to it a lot. This was post college, I think pre business school, so it's kind of in between schooling, living in Dallas. And I've just always loved. I mean, I think the whole album is really strong, start to finish. They have a wide range of different, like of abilities, but this one always felt so urgent to me. And just I had never really even read the lyrics up until today. Going through it, preparing for this mix, and the lyrics actually made me like the song even more because it's almost like this theme of someone, repenting or wanting forgiveness or wanting to start all over because she's, like a mother is crying outside in the darkest of hours, left with her perilous thoughts. They circle to squeeze dry her soul. Like, what amazing writing right there. And she just keeps asking for resurrection to come. Like, she's looking for something to start over. And I think that the lyrics really match the song musically, and I think you find that a lot with the entire album. So, absolutely love this album, and hopefully convince you to kind of check it out. I'm curious to hear what you thought.
I listened to the whole album actually, and
Nice.
I've really enjoyed it. I got a lot of like British pop influence from these guys. So they're
Hmm.
an Australian band. And, Apple kind of puts people in categories, right? So when you look down, it'll say like hard rock or indie pop or whatever.
Right.
And I think they had these guys in like alternative rock or something. And I got less of the alternative rock side of it and more of that British pop. And maybe it's just the lead singer's voice, but that kept coming through for me. But yeah, I did enjoy this album. I could see how this was like a no skip one, just listening to it straight through. There was no times. I think it was one of those moments where I looked down and I was almost like already on the second to last track. I was like, okay, this is good. This is good. So
Nice.
So yeah, like I said, I wasn't as familiar with them. You've brought them on the show before, like you've brought a single from them, but just from like a whole career perspective, was not as familiar with them. But yeah, just really enjoyed it. Like this is good stuff.
Nice. All right. An artist that I really love, and so I'm always happy when he makes an appearance on any of our mixes. And it's Ben Kweller, and he went with the track "No Reason" off of the album "Sha Sha."
Yeah, so Shasha, I think was his first studio album, and we just featured Ben Kweller with his supergroup work with with Ben Lee and Ben Folds in their trio, the Bens. So this is Ben Kweller on his own. Um, I forget how I came across this album, but kind of just found it, and then I was like, all right, I'm gonna pick up this album. Back then, it was like there was no iTunes or anything, so you just kind of bought
Right.
an album, and I would just force myself to listen to an album beginning to end when I would get it. And this was one that I did, and then listened to it again and again and again. It just fell into that no skip category. Um, but yeah, his songwriting is really strong, and the musical work as well. I think some of his later work doesn't sound as I don't know, just kind of independent as this one. Like this is so early in his career. I think there's a little bit more of an amateur quality to it, and I think I just like that a little better. His later work still sounds great because I think his songwriting is still really strong. Um, but yeah, this one always stands out. It's a song that I think when I first listened to this one in particular, I thought it was kind of a happy song, like, oh, there's no reason to cry. But then you kind of listen
Hmm.
to it more, and it's like he's actually kind of really sad and just wants everything to stop, and then he's trying to convince himself that there's no reason to be sad. So I don't know. I think it's a well written song when you can kind of capture a range of emotions there.
Yeah, I agree with what you just said. I really enjoyed the lyrics. The one that, for whatever reason, just made me smile is like, "I'm going against every person that I once walked with. Things are happening. My cat is sleeping. My jade tree's dying." And I just can relate to having like a bonsai tree that's not doing well because I went through that, and it just causes so much stress in your life. Like it's this little miniature tree that you're just absolutely have to take care of and make sure that it's doing okay. And then
Mhm.
you like look over and you see it's not doing okay, and you're like, ah. The struggle is real, but it's like what he keeps saying, but it's okay, it's okay. There's no reason to cry, even though it might be really stressing you out. So I really love Ben Queller. I think his songwriting is excellent. It's really strong, but then it's also met with just like a great voice and a great musical sound. So I've always enjoyed listening to his music, and really like this album, especially because I really like the album art. I think that is something that has always caught my eye. It's like him brushing his teeth wearing whatever those hats are called, but they're great.
A toboggan? Is that a toboggan? I think with the
It
ear
might be a
flaps.
toboggan, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, right.
All right, track 10. You've got Yahe by Vampire Weekend from the album Modern Vampires of the City.
Yes, Modern Vampires of the City is definitely one of my most played albums maybe ever, because it's one of the few album names that I can consistently remember whenever I want to ask my like smart device to play an album. Like I don't know if anyone else has that problem, but you just have to remember a lot when you want to request a song with your voice, and so I often can't remember album names very well, so I just end up defaulting to the one that I do remember, and this is one of them. So I end up listening to it a lot just for that reason. It's like this or Dark Side of the Moon, and that's it. Like those are the only two albums that I'll actually ever remember the name to.
Because if you don't remember it in time, right, it's going to start playing
Right.
whatever it's heard up to that point. And
Exactly.
so,
Yes.
yeah, I know, I totally get that because there's that pressure to finish your request. Like I find myself talking faster
Right.
to,
Yeah.
Alexa or Siri than maybe I need to. I don't know.
Right. No, exactly. Yeah. It's like it's a lot of pressure to request a song or an album.
It just shows you how
Um
dumb AI really is, right?
I agree.
All these
Yeah.
people, all these
It's
people fretting about AI. I'm just like, all right, yeah. It's like I was say, just eat a banana and then talk to Alexa and watch that thing short circuit. Hey,
it's so
that
true.
that's not taking over the
Yeah.
world anytime soon, people. All right.
No, no. Or ask it to fold a whole thing, like bag of laundry, not just like fold a shirt. I know there are robots that can fold shirts, but give it a whole bag of laundry and ask it to fold every single item in it. It'll completely fall apart. Like a robot's not going to understand how to do that. Maybe one day, but we're not there yet. So
Yeah,
it's
or
okay.
figure out if it has to be hang dried or could just go in the dryer.
Right. Right. Oh my God.
Because that's one that
I
always
know.
gets me, especially with my wife's
Right.
clothes. I mean, I don't want to get off on a tangent here, but I mean, that's just an endless like that's the hardest thing I do some days. Okay, it's just trying to make sure I don't ruin her
Yes.
clothes.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Struggle is real. But let's get back to this track here. I I love this album. As I just mentioned on our little, tangent here, I listen to it all the time. This track in particular is a little different than the rest of it. I wanted to pick one that was, not one of the ones that people are most familiar with, most likely, but I just think it's an interesting track, and he's kind of like the way I interpret this is like he's kind of just feeling that you can't win no matter like who or what you believe in. In the second verse, he's singing, "Oh, the motherland don't love you, the fatherland don't love you. So why love anything? Oh, good God, the faithless, they don't love you. The zealous hearts don't love you, and that's not going to change." So it's kind of like this feeling that no matter what you believe in, there's going to be like a group out there that's not going to agree with you and therefore not going to love you. And so, like, why bother? And so I just think it's such an interesting kind of take on that realization that I think a lot of us have sometimes, that it's like there is no winning with everyone. Like no matter what you believe in and who you are, you're never going to please everyone. There's always going to be a group that disagrees with you or doesn't appreciate you and all of that. So I really like that from this perspective. But again, I just think like Vampire Weekend had such an interesting range of sound. They can do a lot with their music, and Ezra's voice is always so interesting. So love this album, and I particularly like this song.
Yeah, I enjoyed the song. I listened to most of this album. I think I just ran out of time as far as finishing this album, but um yeah, I mean, it's just really good and I think they even though the lyrics can sometimes be a little heavy, I think musically it's always very listenable. So it's
Hmm.
never I think they fall in that category of like it doesn't always quite match up because I feel like I'm always in a pretty good mood if I just listen to the instrumentation in their albums,
Right.
right? But then when you get into the lyrics, that's where it gets a little heavier. But no, I mean they're always really good. You featured them on the show several times, and yeah, the album was definitely very good, and I definitely enjoyed this track.
All right. Your last pick here. You went with the track Boy in the Bubble by Paul Simon off of the album Graceland.
Yeah, so Graceland, I mean, a massive album for Paul Simon, probably his last really big album. Won a ton of Grammys. This was like 1988. Kind of introduced everyone into what's now called world music, right? Because took a
Hmm.
very controversial trip to South Africa and partnered with a lot of musicians there. Interestingly enough, he kind of recorded a lot of the music before he had written the lyrics to these songs. And so
Wow.
he kind of spent a lot of time there working with the musicians and getting all of that sorted out and then kind of came back and wrote lyrics to these songs. So um but yeah, I mean, I don't know that this whole album, I just love it. And this song in particular, I think it's the opening track, and Paul Simon's voice is still really strong at this point, and the lyrics are just great. I mean, it kind of vacillates between sort of hope and dread in this album, like
Hmm.
there's kind of or in this song in particular. But then like I just the lyrics that all stick with me is like these are the days of miracle and wonder. This is the long distance call. The way the camera follows us in slow mo. I always think of those three like lines as kind of like you just did something kind of big, right? And it's like you get
Hmm.
that long distance call. You're gonna go call someone and tell them, guess what, right? You got that slow motion. We talk about that strut mix we've done before, right? You're kind of strutting and the camera's following you in slow motion. And I don't know. I choose to take hope away from this song, but there's definitely some elements of dread as well.
Yeah, it's funny that you went the hope angle, because I think for me I was thrown off of the line about like the bomb and the baby carriage that's wired to the radio. So for me that immediately set the tone that this is all bad news. Um and and like the way that the camera follows us in slow-mo is like that this is They're reporting on something in a dramatic fashion, even though it's like a terrible event. I think that next line too, like the way we look to us all, like how do we as humans look to other humans, as it's like kind of sent around the world. But I like your perspective of it. I like the positive spin on that. I really like that. But I think that that's like the magic of music, is that it can mean different things to different people, and that's totally cool. But I like this track a lot, and I love Paul Simon's voice, so really enjoyed listening to this one, and I think the lyrics make it a lot more powerful too.
All right, let's finish this one off with your last pick. It All Began with a Burst by Kishi Bashi. And it's on like 3 different albums of his, so I wasn't sure which one you were picking here.
Yes, 151A.
Okay.
The original 151A, which just celebrated like 10 or 11 years since its release. So this is the most recent album that I was introduced to. It was like 2019 or 2020 that I was told about, and I just listened to it over and over and over and over again. Kishi Bashi is a Japanese musician. He brings in a lot of Japanese lyrics into his songs. So there are some here that actually get translated to "This morning I was bit by a mosquito," which is interesting. I don't know how that applies to the rest of the song, but that just made me laugh. I'm still trying to figure that out. But he's like, I've watched him on Instagram sometimes, like, he'll do like a live session, and he's just so talented with like loops and his voice and violin work and bringing in clapping and whatever. Like everything is kind of like organic in a way in that regard. But then he can build these really complex songs of just layer upon layer upon layer that he's all doing himself. And I think this song really shows that, because if you just start to listen, if you play this song over and over, but you choose to just pick one of the tracks to focus in on, it's just really interesting. And I think it adds like a fun layer, and all of his songs do that. And so I'm just obsessed with him as an artist, but this album in particular has always stood out to me as one of his best ones.
Yeah, this was my favorite album of all your picks, as far as going through it, and just like he does
Nice.
there's so many different instruments. Everything is so, I mean, just interesting. Like he's just a very captivating musician in that sense. And I'm not even watching the video like you just talked about. Um, I think after writing about this and just like listening to a lot of his music, because you've brought him on the show before, but this
Yeah.
was the first time I kind of was just like, all right, let me listen to an album beginning to end. And I think the closest modern, like he is the modern day version of like David Byrne, right, from Talking Heads, in that
Oh,
he
okay.
can do so
Yeah.
many interesting things. And like you said, if you just pull out one song from an album, it's like it may not exactly sound like the rest of his catalog, right? Like it's just he keeps things very interesting. And like you said, some of the lyrics, like in this one, it's like, I got a bit by a mosquito this morning. It's like, yeah, that sounds like a
Right.
Talking Heads lyric. I could see that happening. But when I was trying to think of some sort of modern comparison for him, not even modern, because he's actually the modern comparison, but some sort of comparison, I finally landed on David Byrne.
I like that. Yeah. I could totally see that. Well, I'm happy that you gave his album a listen.
Yeah, no, definitely thumbs up on that one. You'll definitely be captivated by everything on that one. And look, you've got 12 albums you can go and listen to right now with our recommendation behind it. Okay, so there you have it, Volume 2 of our No Skip albums. Okay, tell us what you think on Instagram at Super Awesome Mix, and while you're listening to this show, go ahead and give us a 5-star review. That always helps. And Sammer and I will get to work on our next mix. So for Sammer, this is Matt, and we'll see you next time. Super Awesome Mix is brought to you by DLM. Make shopping easy with DLM, the one-stop shop for all your casual clothing needs. Shop dlmsupplyco.com and enter the promo code AWESOME at checkout to save 15% off your first purchase. That's dlmsupplyco.com.